fastest Mahomes has dazzled with highlight reels, but his greatness was always grounded in how he handles pressure. That's where Shedeur Sanders just made his biggest statement. Despite enduring a humiliating 31-3 loss and facing open ridicule from defenders, Sanders didn't deflect. He didn't spiral. Instead, he stood up and admitted every mistake, calmly, humbly, and without fear. His words weren't dramatic. They were deliberate. And in that moment, they revealed a player who doesn't crumble when the spotlight turns harsh. The performance may have flopped, but the message resonated. NFL scouts often chase traits, arm talent, mobility, mechanics, but they can't quantify what Sanders just showed. His speech drew a line between quarterbacks who panic under adversity and those who grow from it. As front offices revisit that decision to pass on him, the sting won't come from his stats. It'll come from watching the leadership they could have had. NFL teams are scrambling because Shedeur Sanders didn't just play through one of the worst losses of his career. He walked off the field, took the heat, and delivered a response so composed, so brutally honest, and so mature, it shook the entire football world.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
The scoreboard read 31-3. He threw 3 interceptions. It was by all accounts a nightmare performance. But what he did after, that's what flipped the narrative. And now the league's looking around like, how did we miss this guy? Sanders didn't storm out. He didn't deflect. He didn't try to spin the loss into some silver line fluff. He took full responsibility, owned every mistake, and he did it with a level of poise most quarterbacks don't find until year 5, if ever. No excuses, no finger-pointing, no self-preservation. This was on me. That's the quote that stuck. That statement alone separated him from a long list of young quarterbacks who've buckled under pressure, and the contrast is glaring. In a league where blame shifting and vague coach speak can become standard protocol, Shedeur stood up and told the truth. And it didn't sound like media training. It sounded like that's where things got uncomfortable for the teams that passed on him. Because now, every scout and GM who overlooked him is realizing something. The traits they claim to value, the intangibles, the maturity, the ability to handle adversity, they were all there, and Sanders displayed them not in a win, but in the absolute worst moment of his season. And let's be clear, this wasn't just a bad game. This was systemic collapse. Injuries up front, a cold, hostile road environment, veteran defenders scheming to confuse him. They succeeded. He was pressured, picked off, and exposed. And yet, he never unraveled. That's rare. Even while taking hits and watching the game get away from him, he stayed composed. He still pushed the ball downfield. He still tried to make plays. He still led. He played with fearless confidence. And after the game, he made one thing clear. He doesn't play scared, and he doesn't play favorites. No one, not even himself, is safe from accountability. That shook people. Because that's the kind of mindset that resonates far beyond the stat sheet. It's not just about throwing spirals and racking up touchdowns. It's about setting a standard. Shedeur said it right there in the aftermath of a blowout. He didn't have to say much. But what he did say revealed everything. He talked about decompressing, about not reacting emotionally, about the importance of analyzing film and learning from what went wrong before making emotional judgments. That's not rookie talk. That's franchise quarterback behavior. And people noticed. Veteran defenders noticed. Analysts who wrote him off noticed. And teams that drafted someone else, they definitely noticed. The regret is real, because this isn't just about what he will be. It's about what he already is. Mentally, Sanders is operating on a level far beyond where most young quarterbacks are expected to be. He's not rattled by bad games. He's not thrown off by public criticism. He doesn't shrink from it. He studies it, learns from it, grows with it. And that's exactly what sets the elite apart. Look at the greats. The guys who rise above the numbers. They all have that same inner mechanism, an ability to process failure without being consumed by it. And now Shedeur Sanders is showing signs of that exact trait. It's not just that he's resilient. It's how fast he processes setbacks, how clearly he speaks after them, how grounded he stays through the noise. Even when veteran analysts took shots at him, even when defenders mocked him, he didn't clap back. He didn't play the victim. He took it, internalized it, and quietly returned to the lab. That tells you all you need to know about how seriously he takes this. That's not about saving face. That's about chasing greatness. It's not about proving people wrong. It's about proving himself right. And the wild part is, none of this came during a win. There were no highlight reels, no game-winning drives, no touchdowns to distract from the flaws. It was raw, ugly, public, and still, his mindset shined brighter than anything that happened on the field. That's the intangible people talk about, but rarely see in real time. And now NFL teams are left wondering how they didn't catch it sooner. Because when the noise fades and the tape gets studied, one thing becomes clear. Shedeur Sanders has already demonstrated one of the rarest, most valuable traits in football. He knows how to lead through failure. That's what front offices are panicking about. Because for all the advanced scouting and film breakdowns, nothing exposes a quarterback's wiring like a public loss. And Shedeur passed that test with flying colors. He's not trying to survive in the league. He's trying to build something in it. He doesn't get defensive when criticized. He gets focused. He doesn't celebrate moral victories. He demands actual improvement. He doesn't panic when everything collapses. He recalibrates. And this is what's got teams sweating. Because once the physical part catches up with the mental part, once his line stabilizes, his rhythm locks in, and he gets comfortable, then it's over. The mental edge is already there. The rest is just development. And make no mistake, that development is coming. Because a quarterback who responds like that after a nightmare performance, he's not going away. He's going to study every snap, fix every mistake, and come back smarter, sharper, stronger. And when he does, the regret will hit even harder. Because this isn't just a promising young player situation. This is a potential franchise quarterback in the making, whose defining moment, so far, came during a game where everything fell apart. And that's why this story hits different. Because we're not talking about a player who found himself in victory. We're talking about one who revealed himself in defeat. That's where real leaders emerge. That's where the blueprint for greatness is built. So as Shedeur continues to evolve, the pressure doesn't just rest on him. It rests on everyone who doubted him. Every team that passed. Every analyst who wrote him off. Every scout who said he wasn't ready. Because this moment, this game, will follow him. But not as a mark of failure. As the start of something undeniable. And for the teams watching from a distance, that sting is only going to get worse. Because this league has a short memory for stats, but a long memory for regret. If you respect the way Shedeur handled that loss, if you think that kind of leadership matters more than numbers, go ahead and drop your thoughts below. Like the video if you believe mental toughness is just as valuable as arm strength. And make sure you're subscribed. Because as this story unfolds, the road from regret to realization is going to get a whole lot louder. What Shedeur Sanders gave the NFL that night in Chicago wasn't a game to remember. It was a moment to reckon with. A brutal 31-3 defeat, 3 interceptions, and a defense that had him under siege from the first snap to the final whistle. Any rookie quarterback would have been rattled. Most would have shut down in that press conference, recited cliches, then quietly exited stage left to avoid the avalanche of criticism. But Shedeur didn't duck. He stood right there in the wreckage of that loss and looked every camera in the eye, not with excuses, not with bitterness, but with clarity. And what he said in that moment did more to elevate his status in the eyes of coaches, analysts, and rival front offices than any win he's had so far. Because it wasn't a highlight reel moment. It was a human moment. And the league took notice. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't try to spin it. He said he wasn't good enough. He said he had to be better. He said it was on him. And just like that, every GM who had passed on drafting Shedeur Sanders suddenly had a pit in their stomach. Because it's easy to buy into a quarterback when they're at their best. That's what the league is built to reward. Efficiency, control, polish. But the ones who last, the ones who become legends, they're forged in the fire of failure. That's where Shedeur is different. He didn't flinch when the pressure came. Not during the game, and not afterward. Even while his offensive line collapsed, even while the veteran defenders blitzed and baited him, even while he threw 3 picks, even while the sideline looked flat and the scoreboard kept piling on, he didn't check out. And after the game, he didn't hide behind circumstances. He owned it. He talked about processing, about stepping back, about not reacting emotionally, because reacting emotionally doesn't fix mistakes. It only amplifies them. He talked about watching film, about learning from it, about growth. And if you listen closely, you could hear what NFL teams missed in him, the ability to lead through chaos. He wasn't just managing a loss. He was modeling accountability. And for a quarterback, that's everything. Not every guy can rally a locker room. Not every guy can walk in after the worst game of his life and make his teammates believe in him more. But Sanders did, because in a loss that could have crushed his confidence, he showed exactly what his teammates and the league needed to see. He took all the heat, all the blame, and then basically said, "We move forward." That's maturity. That's leadership. That's not something you learn overnight. It's something that develops over years of pressure, doubt, and expectation. And Shedeur's been carrying that weight longer than most quarterbacks in his position. So when he says he doesn't play with fear, believe him. He proved it by standing tall in that pocket while the defense closed in. He proved it by making deep throws in tight windows, even when the risk of a turnover was high. He proved it by never taking his foot off the gas, even when the game was out of reach. That mentality of never backing down is exactly what teams say they want. But here's the truth. A lot of them still passed. They saw the arm talent. They saw the poise. They heard the interviews. They knew the pedigree. And they still let him go because there was always an excuse. Too raw, too flashy, too young, too reliant on his last name. But now they're watching a young quarterback navigate pressure with more grace and composure than players drafted ahead of him. And they're not just regretting missing out on a playmaker. They're regretting missing out on a tone setter. Because franchise quarterbacks aren't just guys who put up numbers. They're the guys who set the emotional tone for an entire... And what Shedeur showed after that loss was the emotional strength of someone who can handle the weight of a franchise. You can coach mechanics. You can teach timing. You can improve decision-making. But you can't teach a quarterback how to carry a locker room through adversity. And that's where Sanders already looks like a veteran. He didn't just handle criticism. He invited it. He embraced it. Not because he enjoys it, but because he knows it comes with the job. There was no flinching when veteran defenders called him out. No passive-aggressive responses on social media. No hiding behind coaching decisions. He showed up, took the loss, took the heat, and still made it clear that he's not backing down. That's what you want in a franchise QB. That's the guy who leads your team into a cold-weather playoff game and doesn't blink. That's the guy who steadies the offense in the fourth quarter when everything feels like it's falling apart. And when teams really see it, they realize how much they missed. Because they didn't just pass on a prospect. They passed on a competitor, a leader, a quarterback who has already shown he can take the lowest moment of his career and turn it into a lesson, not just for himself, but for everyone watching. There's a reason the comparisons to guys like Brady and Mahomes are starting to pop up. Not because of talent alone, but because of how Sanders handles the moments in between. The losses, the pressure, the expectation. Those are the moments that make quarterbacks legends. And if this is how Sanders responds to a 31-3 humiliation, then what happens when he's on a roster with a fully healthy line? A strong system? Coaches who believe in him? He's already got the hard part down. And that's why this story is just getting started. So the question becomes, how many other teams are going to learn from this? How many are going to stop looking at combined stats and start paying attention to post-game interviews? Because that's where the truth is. That's where you find out if a guy is built for the long haul. And Shedeur Sanders? He just put the entire league on notice. Won not by winning, but by losing better than most quarterbacks have ever lost. And here's where it really hits different. Because you can't coach what Shedeur Sanders showed that day. You can't draw it up on a whiteboard or simulate it in practice. You can't fake it in interviews. And you definitely can't hide from it when the lights are on and the score is 31-3. This wasn't about talent. Everyone knows Sanders can sling it. He has the physical tools, the arm strength, the deep ball, the footwork. It's all there. That's not in question. What is in question for every young quarterback coming into this league is one thing. Can you lead when things fall apart? Shedeur answered that with yes, so loud it echoed through every front office that passed on him. This wasn't just one rough game. It was a masterclass in mental toughness delivered through a loss. And if you missed it because you were looking at box scores or fantasy points, you weren't paying attention, because that post-game moment, that wasn't just about self-reflection. It was about standard setting. And the standard Shedeur set, it's higher than the scoreboard. He spoke with the clarity of someone who doesn't see losses as defeats. They're data points, film to study, fuel to burn. There was no panic in his voice, no confusion. He knew what went wrong. He owned it, and he already knew what he needed to do next. And that scares teams. Not because he's flashy, not because he's loud, but because he's clear. He knows exactly who he is, and more importantly, who he wants to be. That kind of internal compass, it's rare, especially in this league, especially at quarterback. And this isn't coming from a place of arrogance. Sanders doesn't talk like he's untouchable. He talks like he's responsible. There was a huge difference. He never once blamed his offensive line, even though they were collapsing all game. He didn't bring up the cold. He didn't mention that the defense was full of veterans who'd clearly studied his tape. All of that would have been true. All of it would have been fair. But he didn't go there, because he knew the second he started making excuses, the team dynamic changes, the trust erodes, the locker room fractures. He's not here for that. He's here to build something. And what makes this even more impactful is that Shedeur wasn't supposed to be the grizzled leader yet. He's young, new, still developing. But mentally, he's already in a space that most players take years to reach. That's not something scouts can always see during the pre-draft process. They can measure speed and strength, analyze footwork and film, but they can't always predict how a guy will respond after being embarrassed in front of the world. And that's the thing with Shedeur. This wasn't just a bounce-back moment. This was a mindset on full display. He didn't just take the hit. He absorbed it, processed it, and turned it into motivation. You could feel in how he spoke. There was no flinching, no backpedaling, no cracks in the foundation, just calm, focus, resolve. That's the kind of quarterback you want leading a 2-minute drill. That's the guy you want into the huddle when your season is on the line. That's who you want addressing the media after a playoff loss. Not to smooth things over, but to remind everyone that the standard hasn't changed. And again, it wasn't about the stats. It wasn't about the performance. It was about how he responded to all of it. And let's not forget, he was getting dragged. By analysts, by social media, by veterans. People were calling him out, questioning his readiness, wondering if he'd been overhyped. And what did he do? He didn't log off. He didn't get defensive. He didn't throw shade. He said, I've got to be better. That's it. That's the whole message. He didn't need to go into damage control because his mindset was a control. That's the kind of player who can weather a long season, a tough stretch of games, and come out better on the other side. And if that's already built into him this early in his career, the potential for growth is terrifying in a good way, because now the spotlight is going to stay on him. And not because he's a coach's son, or because of his name, but because of who he's showing up as when the pressure's highest. He's already earned the respect that most quarterbacks are still trying to find. And here's the wildest part. He didn't say anything groundbreaking. He didn't reinvent leadership in that interview. What made it so powerful was how genuine it was. Every word had weight, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. You could tell he believed every syllable. That's what leadership sounds like. And now the question isn't whether Shedeur Sanders is going to succeed. The question is, how many teams are going to regret not giving him the chance sooner? Because this isn't a quarterback who needs to be managed. He's one who can manage others, who can take charge of a sideline, of a team, of an entire narrative. And those teams that passed on him, they didn't just miss out on a strong arm or dual threat talent. They missed out on someone who shows up when it matters most, even when it hurts the most. They missed out on that rare combination of emotional control, self-awareness, and competitive fire that actually builds dynasties. They missed out on a quarterback who lost by 4 touchdowns and somehow walked away with more respect than it going in. And that's not easy to do. That's not luck. That's built in. Here's the truth nobody in those draft rooms wants to admit out loud. They saw the signs and they still passed. They saw the calm and chaos. They saw the competitive fire. They saw the way he never threw teammates under the bus, even when the bus was practically on top of him. But they still gambled on flashier arms, bigger frames, safer bets. Now, they're watching a 21-year-old quarterback redefine what it means to bounce back. Not with a stat padding game, not with a PR tour, but with quiet, commanding accountability. With a kind of clarity that makes coaches lean forward and players fall in line. Shedeur Sanders didn't just survive a nightmare loss. He turned it into proof that he can take the worst day of his professional career and respond like someone who's seen it all before. And if that's how he handles rock bottom, just imagine how dangerous he'll be at the top. Because there's no fear, no ego, no blame, just film, focus, and the next opportunity. That's not potential. That's trajectory. So yeah, NFL teams are regretting it. Loudly, privately, relentlessly. Because while they drafted for now, Sanders is already showing he's built for what comes next. If you're locked in on the Shedeur Sanders journey, drop your thoughts below. Think the league missed? Think this is just the beginning? Smash that like button if you believe mindset matters more than a box score. And subscribe so you're here for every step of the rise.